Student Services Committee here on Tuesday, March 4th. Our first order of business would be to verify that the meeting has been properly posted.
Yes, it was.
All right, thank you. Next would be an opportunity for public comment. Did we have anyone sign up?
I do not.
We did not. All right. Then let's move on to our approval of our Student Services minutes from February 4th.
I move that we approve the minutes from February 4th.
Thank you.
Second.
Second by Ms. Kozlowski. Any questions or comments on the minutes? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, measure passes 5-0. Let's move on then to our first discussion and possible action item this evening, which is to approve revisions to policy 8395 on student mental health services. Mr. Pat.
Thank you, Mr. Zenobia. This policy is revised to reflect the provision of both mental and physical health services in school, both through school resources, student services, guidance, and school nursing services. The policy is also updated to better reflect the option for arrangements of on-site health providers provided by outside agencies, either in person or virtually, as supplementary to services provided by school staff. Adoption of these revisions was a Neola recommendation, and they are before you.
All right. Any questions or comments from the committee? Ms. Foy.
Just a clarification. It seems to be very much identifying the fact that this agreement will also stipulate the district's responsibility to provide a free and appropriate public education for students with an IEP, so that services are consistent with the district requirements. So those are like separate from, this is everybody, all the other things besides the ones in IEPs? Is that how I would read that, would interpret that?
It would be a combination of both. Generally, the supplemental aids and services brought on by an IEP might bring in outside providers. So it is for all, anybody we bring in from the outside that needs to meet the needs of students, whether they have an IEP or not.
Okay.
So.
Any other questions or comments? Go ahead, Ms. Kozlowski.
Just in linking, I think, to the last discussion that we had last month with Care Solace, that's kind of the connection here with outside agencies that we refer to as within this policy, correct?
Not necessarily. Care Solace is somebody that we provide a resource for, so we do contract with them. They don't specifically come into the schools that way, so that's really a service we do for student services. We do contract with family services to bring in and allow our space for outside providers for mental health support for certain students, so that comes into play here, as well as certain individuals that might come on campus as part of nursing services for students who need them from an outside contracted service. So that's what this encompasses.
And that is exclusive of IEPs?
Yes, and could be a 504.
Could be. I'm just trying to connect the dots as to what types of people are coming into our schools. So I understand an IEP, but then other services that would be for varied supports would be like what?
Generally, most of the time it would be IEP driven or mental health driven. So there, as with anything, a purpose for those outside providers to be on our campuses. Rarely would there be a case where it would be a student who didn't have a specific plan. That would have to be something that it would still be health related or a health plan. So all that purpose would be driven through specific need.
Got it. And then my final question is there's clarification within the policy that talks that anyone who comes onto our premises must abide by our policies. Do we do any other checks on who is coming into our schools?
Anytime somebody comes into a school as, well, we're going to do a background check through the agency. So for like nursing services, we have a background check done by them and a contract with them that says that was taken care of. Same thing for the mental health providers, right? Our memorandum of understanding goes through that those people are vetted to be on our campus to work with our kids.
Perfect, thank you.
Yep.
All right. Anything else? Just a question on, page 2, section A. Just the word change from financial necessities to arrangements. I'm assuming all these things are done by contract prior to coming in. Is just a recommendation on the word. Does that change anything in setting these contracts up financially, or? It's,
I think the term from necessity to arrangement is just that a good change in term. Our arrangements will vary based on services, and I think it allows more flexibility. A necessity seems like it's a must-have in some way. So there could be a situation where things, yeah, I guess necessities versus arrangements, I think it's just a better word to say that we have an understanding in that in different situations, we can maybe change those or modify those, or it just allows us a word that allows flexibility for whatever we're trying to do. So we could have somebody come in that is different, like individualized for a service, and it just might be something we haven't done before based on the need for a student. So this, I think, provides us a little flexibility. It could also be changing the arrangement or anything to that effect. I guess I don't have a great answer other than everything we do is pre-contracted and those arrangements are made ahead of time.
okay. Nothing specific that made
Yeah.
the change. Okay, thank you. Okay, so this is a discussion but possible action item on this policy. I don't know if the committee feels comfortable enough to want to advance this, or if we would want to take more time with it. We would be looking for a motion if we'd want to push it forward.
I would motion to approve the revisions to policy 8395, student mental health services as recommended.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Harland. All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. Passes 5-0. All right, our next discussion possible action is policy 5610, which is suspension and expulsion, which we have brought back from the previous meeting. Mr. Pat, if you could set us up for some discussion on this.
Thank you, Mr. Zenobia. As stated, we have discussed this in previous meetings, and so at our previous student services meeting, Mr. Harlan requested to bring this back for discussion, so I really wanted to open it up for a conversation around that. Our previous nexus to this is that this has some language, and the recommendation was to rescind 5611 into 5610, and so we're here to look at the language of 5610 as requested.
All right, thank you. Any questions or comments from the committee on this 5610? Mr. Harlan?
No, I don't necessarily have any specific actions on this. I just wanted to make sure that we were considering both of these policies together, as they were the ones that had the expressed overlap between the two of them. So I'm good with 5610 as it stands.
Okay, Mrs. Voigt?
In my discussion is really more related to, if we were looking at 5611 first, as it rolls into this one. So my concern there is that this talks about the fact that in the first or the first sentence, that this is in compliance with students' due process rights, which are defined in 5611. And by taking away 5611, we're losing that link. And if we want this to replace it, we'd have to put more of 5611 into here, I think, like some of the wording there. Especially the part that's missing is the idea that, which we talked about, that this is in the handbook, and I'd asked to get a copy of the handbook to sort of see that. And due process of disciplinary action references 5611. Which is what we're trying to say doesn't exist. And it is in the handbook because of 5611. And when we wrote this back when it was originally written by the school board, it has the statement at the very end of 5611 that says that the statement of due process rights should be placed in all student handbooks in a manner that will facilitate understanding by students and their parents. So the reason it's in the handbook is because it's required in this particular policy, and like to say that, to take that policy away, there's a couple pieces we have to, if that's going to all be in 5610, just a couple of those things that we have to add.
Okay. And I think with our discussion last time, we discussed all three of these pieces kind of together. So I understand we're trying to take maybe the one being 5610 that may need some revision, which if that were to happen would allow us to rescind 5611. And I know, Mr. Penn, Dr. Siebert are ready to speak maybe more to the handbook on some level, but my understanding is there will be no issue in amending the handbook at some point to reflect these things, correct?
Yeah, so it is something that is easily changeable for us, so we can update those links quickly and accurately once something is passed. And our process, as Dr. Siebert and I have talked about, will be to continue to do that as we change policy and pass policy, that we update the links. So Julie Keller has been doing that for us, and we will continue to do that as a process. So those are updated instantly or consistently.
Okay.
I think the other thing, if I might, Mr. Zenobia, is when we bring policies forward, we will have an awareness of which ones are in the handbook and which aren't. And so we can reference that when you're discussing them out of the gate. And then, should you approve them, we can automatically update them via Julie. So that the only issue will be if somebody actually, Mr. Pat brought this up, physically printed it out, right, which I don't think is a common occurrence, but I can't say it doesn't exist. Then certainly, it's not going to be the same policy if they printed the policy to go with it. But again, I don't know how prevalent that is. So as long as we just kind of have a little more forethought with what's in the handbook, I think we've already updated it to reflect current practice, and then we can do that regularly with the prior notice to the committees and the board as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I think from our discussion tonight and from last time, we would be looking for, is there something that we as a committee would like to look at adding to 5610 that would reflect the ability for us to rescind 5611? Because I believe that was, a lot of consensus was around the committee being okay with rescinding 5611 as long as those changes were reflected in 5610. So I would, I would entertain anything from the committee, any ideas of potential amendments to consider. I think if not, we would just be stuck at the crossroads that we've been at. So I'm confident that the handbook can be amended to make any reflection so that students and parents know where to find this information. I think the policy does a good job of reflecting that. We can make adjustments. So I would be looking for any suggestions or.
Well, one of the things that I think should definitely be included in 5610 is the first statement in 5611, that the Board of Education recognizes the importance of safeguarding a student's constitutional rights, particularly when subject to the district's disciplinary procedures. I think it's important for them to realize, in terms of administrative law, that is one of the things that students have a right, to due process in the time of suspension, expulsion, et cetera. And I think that, for students to know that they have those rights, and that's basically what this is defining in 5611, that students have rights. And it kind of looks like when we're taking away that particular subsection, that we're taking away some of the rights, and that's not obviously what we're trying to do, but I don't want it to look like that for the stakeholders. Like when you say we're deleting due process rights for students, it seems like we're taking them away, even though that's not the case. So I want to make sure that that statement that says that they do have rights, and the school board just wants to make sure that we're safeguarding that, is included in 5610 if we get rid of 5611.
Mrs. Koenig?
Sure, thank you. When I look at the first sentence in 5610, it does, the second half of the sentence says, "is a substantial sanction," and that such action must comply with the student's due process rights. So it does reference that there are due process rights, and if those are found in the student handbook, I'm seeing that it's referenced, so I feel like it's not really being removed, but it is referenced in that first sentence. Is that what you mean? Like, that they
when
don't
they-
know they have rights? What?
Again, my point would be, the reason it's in the handbook is because this policy requires it. So maybe at that point, we identify the fact that, again, not 5611 being referenced in the handbook, but 5610 being referenced in the handbook, that says, that we're going to spell it out in the handbook. The very last sentence, the statement of due process rights should be placed in all student handbooks in a manner that will facilitate understanding by students and their parents. So my concern is that we as a board are saying they have those rights, and we want them to be able to see where they're available. Does that make sense? That's what's missing when we get rid of this, is those two statements, and we can easily add it into 5610 and have that be referenced as the source of, the reason why it's in the handbook. Because we want them to know about it. That's, the school board is saying, we want you to know that you have due process rights, and that's why it's in the handbook.
So adding possibly something that would be, at the end of that sentence, must comply with the student's due process rights as referenced in the student handbook, or some sort of indicator that that's where it's found? Is that what you feel is missing?
Well,
Yeah.
just the tie, that this is saying that they have rights. Our policy is saying that that we want to make sure that they're aware that they have rights, and that we're not, as a board, trying to take any of those rights away from them.
Right, so then just referencing maybe a few words after that, with the student's due process rights as noted in the student handbook? Or you want that tie of reference from the student handbook into that sentence? In other words, you want that location piece
Right.
in there. So something along that lines would
Right.
be sufficient?
I'm thinking with students' due process rights, which should be placed in all student handbooks in a manner that will facilitate understanding of students' rights and their, students and their parents. Just that phrase.
You just made a recommendation.
Yeah, that's a recommendation that I'd be
Sure,
making.
okay.
So are you making an official motion, or?
I can make that motion.
Okay.
I move that we, at the end of the first sentence in 5610, after "with the students' due process rights," which should be placed in all student handbooks in a manner that will facilitate understanding by students and their parents, which is the very end of 5611.
Okay, so just to be clear, Mrs. Voigt, so I'm looking at 5611. So you're picking up the sentence starting with the word "should"? So right after, okay,
It's because we're referencing students' due process rights,
okay.
which should be placed in all student handbooks in a manner that will facilitate understanding by students and their parents.
Okay,
And then where 5611 had been in the handbook, we can now reference 5610. Does that make sense? Yeah.
okay.
Yep.
All right, so Mrs. Voigt has made a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, seconded by Mrs. Koenig. All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. So that amendment passes 5-0. All right, and in making that amended suggestion, the committee can move forward to approve 5610, and then in the next, rescind 5611. So if the committee is comfortable with that, and we don't need to come back with another revision from administration, I'd be looking for a motion to approve 5610 as amended.
I move to amend policy 5610 as amended.
Second.
Thank you. Second one, Mrs. Koenig. All right. Any other comments or clarification? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. Passes 5-0. All right, thank you. So let's then move on to the next recommended action for this evening, which would be to discuss and potentially rescind Policy 5611, due process rights.
I move to rescind policy 5611, due process rights.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Harlan. Any other conversation or clarification? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed say no. Passes 5-0. Okay. So we are past the policy portion tonight, which was all of our action items, and we are on to our discussion information item, which is the EMLSS Academic and Social Behavior Team Update.
Thank you, Mr. Zenobia. We'll mirror here. Obviously, the packet I shared with you is a copy of this presentation. Okay, well, Student Services gets not as much glory as our teaching and learning department sometimes when it comes to some of the things that they are doing. So really, this is just a high-level update to let this committee know that behavior is, and social and academic behavior is a focus for us as a Student Services team. I just wanted to take you through the steps we have taken this year to start to move that forward. Again, this is the low-level, high-level, low-level vision starting this whole process. So obviously, the goal for us as a Student Services team is to create a K-12 behavior system, right? And what is a good system? It's built on really essential standards. So what is the language at each grade level that we expect our students to meet the standard of? And those have to be determined and be consistent at every level in every school. EMLSS is a term you've heard, that equitable multi-level system of support. We have that moving forward in teaching and learning to make sure that we meet students in their universal instruction. They need a little bit more support, then we add that with some group instruction targeted, and then maybe more intense at the Tier 3 level. No different for behavior. We are looking to do the universal level, what all of our teachers can take from that common language. How can they use strategies to work with students in the classroom to help them become more engaged, to have a good managed classroom and remove barriers for students who might be struggling, and proactive at the universal level. PBIS is something you hear a lot of. It's more prevalent at our elementary and middle schools, and that's positive behavior intervention and supports, and that's rewarding students for good behavior, right? And that is something that I'll talk a little more about and share some examples here moving forward, how that is going. Tier 2, again, targeted Tier 3 intensive. And then we really want to deliver that and have that common language and standard through a viable curriculum, a behavior curriculum. Some of the things we are doing for that is taking a look at Navigate 360 provides us some resources, and that's something we're piloting currently. So again, this vision is beginning, and those are some things we have in place as we move forward and start to realize it. We want it to be a transferable experience. So if you go from Hatfield Elementary to Rose Glen Elementary, you are hearing common language. You are experiencing different tiers of behavior in a very similar way as far as what the offerings are, as far as what the reward system is, proactive, in the classroom in the Tier 1 level, whatever that looks like, from a menu of Tier 2 interventions at each school, that common language is always being infused into our students' behavior, specifically that grade level standard that we are expecting them to meet. Here is the standard, and we're doing these things to get you to that standard for your behavior. And again, reducing those barriers. So this also supports our KPI for student services, which is increasing engagement. That happens through attendance, but when you feel supported and you feel success academically through behavior support and removing those barriers so you can feel like you can access your curriculum for academics, that leads to more engagement. So kind of the current state of the state. pockets of excellence, right? You hear that often, like we've got these great pockets of things that are happening, thus the need for us to systematize and really try to look at the good things in those pockets, refine, and then bring teams together to make sure we're moving in the same direction with the best of those pockets of excellence. So we have some elementary PBIS and behavior academies, so I'm going to highlight that a little bit from some of you elementary, some of the work that they're doing. Middle school PBIS integration, I've spoken to this a little bit in my behavior update on some data that I shared here previously. Mentioned the piloting of Navigate 360 at the middle and the high school level. And so those are some of the things that we're moving forward with. Some things that are in need of support, right? Commonality, like I said, by grade level, common language, common processes and procedures, those essential standards, that curriculum integration. How do I take this resource and integrate it similarly to what it would be like for a student if they went to a different school at the same grade level? And then what data are we gathering and how are we using that data to make decisions? Some of the behavior referrals are different in our schools, and how they record those referrals is not always similar as well. So those are things that we're looking at. And we must teach behavior, right? We really need to understand how important that is. When new teachers coming in, we also need to have a system where with any turnover, they're coming in and they have things that they can understand and pull from, and their teaching counterparts can support them with that consistent curriculum. On the academic side, we know that with Act 20 and the reports we've gotten, that system that was put in place for them to kind of jump in and plug and play, very clear things to pull from, what to do, made everybody feel like they were supported, and it integrated very well because it was there for them to use in a fairly simplistic manner. That is the vision we're looking at for behavior as well. And just a couple of things for you to take a look at. So getting to that pockets to pioneer, right? You have to have those pioneers that kind of jump ahead a little bit. Thus, sometimes you have pockets because they go ahead maybe a little quicker, but they also are like a pilot for us. So mentioning Summit View Elementary School, they have a very robust PBIS system. With that, they have a staff site that is really something that we as a as a district EMLSS team for academic and social behavior, we are looking for these things to try to implement and replicate. It's a possibility we may use a lot of what is here and definitely consider it as we move forward for the entire system. So a couple things that you're seeing are just the Tier 1 and the Tier 2 on the left-hand side, as I look at it on the screen, is what you see often, right? The 4 Bs: be responsible, be respectful, be safe, be kind. Again, our essential standards are going to be more robust language at grade level that are going to support what that means. So when a student goes to Tier 2 and Tier 3, they can really understand what those 4 things mean at a deeper level and have a targeted intervention with supportive curriculum to help them learn more, because Tier 1 is potentially not working for them. When you read the proactive approach up above, that just reinforces what we're trying to do at our schools, and that reward system is really great for our kids at elementary, and it's happening at multiple elementary schools in multiple ways. We're looking just to have that consistent and supportive for everyone. The Tier 2 component is where then we get to that targeted aspect, and what you're looking at is really a check-in, check-out system. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that at the middle school level. So that's CICO, and it really is about checking in with students, understanding where they're at, and then getting feedback in the moment to see if somebody needs a little more support in that day. It's meeting them in the morning and then checking in with them because of what they reported as far as where they're at and how they're feeling. We know a variety of students come in with a variety of things, and that's been something that's been great for different schools. That's just one Tier 2 component for certain students that might be on the radar that are struggling in Tier 1 for behavior. So all those resources are there for our staff. We are looking to have those consistent and robust and accessible, and then those implemented with fidelity across our system. So a couple of examples of that as we realize this vision. The other aspect, when we get to like a Tier 3, and this is something that you'll see the behavior academies up there, Behavior Solutions and Solution Tree is someone we have partnered with for EMLSS and are really following their lead and using their resources and professional development from them to move our system in the right direction academically and behaviorally. When I got professional development with them, we had this concept of academies. So this is something that's happening at some of you elementary, and when you're looking at the academies and the targets of them, you have a hands-off academy where we know young individuals can be squirrely and hands-on often, but when that's really not working and it's to another level, what then? Tier 2, okay, we'll do a check-in, check-out, we'll have some small group and talk about it, but it continues to happen. Then you move to a very robust system where hands-off academy is something that you're just spelling it out for what it is. There's an entrance criteria, there are sessions for it, and then there's an exit criteria. When you take a look at the pictures, you can see that explanation, and you can see the 17 lessons that are potentials for the student to go through to learn what it really means. And they're going to do reflective activities and think about their own thinking and engage in things during a 20 to 30 minute period that is going to change their behavior, look to support them in changing behavior, because this is now to a point where their academics are impacted, and we have to get and teach that at a deeper level. So again, just an example of things that we are considering for a K-12 system to put into place with consistent resources and a consistent process, and the individuals who will take kids through that process based on when they qualify, what the criteria looks like. So an example there at the elementary. And I want to talk about the Pockets of Pioneers for our academic and social behavior for middle school. And so I just put their logos up there. So I just asked them to share with me some of the things for PBIS that they are experiencing this year. It's new for them at the middle school level. They've been really implementing this with fidelity. And I'll just share verbatim what they said. It's not super long. I'll try to use a good story voice if I can. So Les Paul. We don't have really any singular standout story. Our negative behaviors, however, have decreased greatly. Our behavior rate is 1/3 of what it was last year at this time. All of our grades have been involved in our PBIS Cardinal Way recognition, a weekly recognition, weekly raffles, and students and events and activities that have been a result of a positive trend. So they're seeing a positive trend throughout their school because of what they're implementing. And again, talking about a third negative behavior decrease. I'm sorry, a third of what it was, so a 2/3 decrease. Thank you. Moving on to Butler Middle School. We are thrilled with the results of the daily status check in PBIS rewards. Every day, students are expected to check in on PBIS rewards and indicate whether they are ready to learn, hard to learn, or they can't learn. So they literally go on their iPad and they check where they are at as far as this check-in, check-out system. And it's that simple for our school to do with technology. Our student services team and admin get the email, and when students select they can't learn, one of us meets with that student to process their emotional state with the intent to improve a can't learn to maybe a hard to learn feeling, at least before they go back to class. Some conversations are quick and some take a little more time. One resulted in a risk assessment for which we were grateful to have been able to intervene with this student very early. This consistent process is valued by staff. Teachers can see which students feel like they are struggling and offer a little extra support or attention. Relationships have been strengthened through this process, and they have seen a significant reduction in students selecting the can't learn since they have put this in place from the beginning of the school year. In Horning, PBIS rewards have been a fun way to get students both motivated and to reward them for their good behaviors. They started with prizes that they chose for like a lunch bunch, some candy prizes, maybe an optional seating for lunch. And one day a student approached one of the coordinators about doing Beyblades tournament, and they ended up adding it to their PBIS rewards store. I had to look up what Beyblades was. It's like a small arena where you take things that look like spinny tops and you spin them, and then they go in the arena and they battle each other, and then there's a winner. So I'm sure there was something like this when we were younger, only a few years ago. But this is what I had to look up, so it is a cool game. It's very small and compact. So anyways, with that, they ended up adding it to the reward store, and they do a tournament once a week on Fridays, and they have a massive turnout for students who are interested. They continue to show excitement. It's mainly right now male students, but throughout the week, they remind each other, they're catching these kids reminding each other to do their best to earn their feathers for their PBIS rewards so they can play on Friday, because of this game, along with some of the other things. It's a big reward for a large group of students. They've worked hard to meet daily learning goals, improve behaviors with iPad usage, and they've been more on task to earn those hawk feathers for being able to get the privileges through PBIS. It has led to more students suggesting activities that they'd be interested in as well, so things that kids really enjoy and maybe can have access to for continuing to show positive behavior. So it's a whole new window of opportunities when students do their best and they're seeing that reward, and that's been positive. So those are just a couple things. Oh, go ahead, Diane.
You mentioned the improvement in behaviors at Les Paul. Have they seen that same type of reduction of negative behaviors at Butler and at Horning?
So Mr. Bennett sent the email, and I'm not sure exactly what he defines negative behaviors as. What I can say is when I presented here, overall at our middle schools, negative behaviors, so specifically some of the in-class interruptions were a major part of a barrier to academic learning, were down, I believe, 25% across the board comparatively to last year. So the number of all of them at all the middle schools was down. I can't recall specifically the other schools, but across the board, it is my recollection that they were all down with overall negative behaviors. Also, they're down in the intense consequences for behavior. So suspensions were down, and consultations and some of this teaching and meeting were way up for students to get a little bit more support that way and make some of those connections for positive behavior. So just a couple things that are, again, those pioneers that we are starting and we are looking to systematize and use as a launch pad. We have a team that started to meet in February. It is run by Mark Lenner, our Director of Student Services, as well as Lisa Paulin, our Director of Secondary Special Education. It's got 17 team members with representation from all levels in our district, and we're coming together to take these resources, take some of these pockets, and then vet this to a viable system. This is a multi-year project, which we have just launched in February. The last slide really is just a couple of things you can see that are really from our agendas, and these are the things that we have started to work with, just solidifying my presentation to you that we are focused on behavior solutions and the behavior, the solution tree professional development we've gotten, as well as the creation of common language at each level. We're just starting with that. So right now we're waiting for our schools to give us back what they are doing, because we have a lot of schools and we are looking for their feedback on what they all do so we can start to use that to see what we have and take the next step of creating that common language. So that's where we're at. Questions do you have?
Mrs. Canning.
Awesome, thank you. This is great. I just had a question going back to the elementary, the Hands-Off Academy. When a student becomes a part of that particular group, I know you mentioned there are like, I think you said 17 different steps or, levels to work through. When does that happen? You said it's about 30 minutes. When do they attend that? Like, when is that held?
That would be a time where they would find it in the student's day. It could be, I don't know the elementary schedule that well. Ms. Gannerman, if you want to talk to me about when interventions happen academically. So it could be in place of an academic intervention within the classroom or pulled from the classroom.
Yeah, I think it's really different at each school. It could be during that intervention time that they all often call like what I need. It could be during a recess time where you are intentionally reteaching how to play but not maybe have hands-on so physical. It could be, if it's like one-on-one, it could just be at a different time of the day. It may depend on the group of students, the schedule of the day for the whole school. But oftentimes kids who are in there, that's been an issue. And so it's a lot of reteaching. So they do like to have the kids generalize those skills back to the playground or in the hallway or something like that. So the schedule of when it happens varies.
Okay, so it's not during like an academic pullout time. It's more a time when either it's a recess time or like an independent time where they're not missing any instruction.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments? Ms. Kozlowski.
I think this is fantastic. I think that when, we sit and talk about it even over the last couple of years, the behavior, and when we hear our teachers in the classrooms that are struggling with how to manage when you've got one or two students, that's creating such a disruption for the entire class, that building a program such as this, even at the outset here, it already sounds like it's making good progress, and we're giving language, tools, and solutions to our teams to be able to manage that, which I don't think we could ask for anything better than giving them the tools and the guidance to be able to do all of this. So I think this is, I'm really excited to follow this around, but very well done. This is exciting.
Mr. Harlan?
So I think it is, I obviously love the standardization across the district, definitely in favor of that. I think you called them feathers, so is that language is specific for Horning? Or is that is wider across the program?
Yeah, so the reward system, so it would be Horning Hawks, so they give feathers, is what they call their slip, to give to students. So they earn having good behavior, they earn those rewards, PBIS bucks or feathers or whatever else they're called. I can't remember what I put here for Summit View. But all schools will call them something a little bit different. So the 4Bs, sort of like an eagle, so I don't know if they call them feathers as well, but whatever the mascot might be, anything you can come up with, that's really what they're referring to.
Is there any, they would lose the feathers or the points once they're earned, or is it just you don't earn it for not doing a specific behavior? I guess I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, you're always going to be rewarded for your good behavior, and they're not going to take that away, but you're obviously not going to get rewarded for your bad behavior, so you have to continuously have good behavior in order to achieve reward status. So it's not, there's a certain number of feathers for Horning you have to earn in order to be eligible for an award. So that is maybe a little bit different at schools, and I don't have an exact number, but it's not, you did great today, and this one thing, you can come in and have all these things. There is a process to it, and students have to earn it through consistent positive behavior or good behavior.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's, I love the data, and so now, obviously my next piece is, and I know you're building it, and February is 1 month, which it's hard to make a trend in a month, but a possible outcome you have is the behavior solutions flowchart and the behavioral data. Is that something that would be available, say, at the end of this year, or is that too soon? Would we want to do a year over year? I'm not real sure what, as much as I love data, I want data to be relevant and meaningful to say, like, this is how we can see what is happening and how it's going. But I'm really fascinated as to where these will go. So at some point, I would just ask if we could, at least maybe in a Friday package or an update, see what this is, because I think it's outstanding. I just think it's great.
Yes, I can share that with you this Friday. We have that document, and that will be used as a source we vet for us as a system, right? So we are going to utilize it and then say, okay, is this viable? Is this what we feel is what we want to do as a system? So we need that input from our schools in order to vet that, and it might be more simplified, easier to follow, but I do have it, and so I will share it in the packet.
That'd be great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mrs. Canning?
Thanks, one more. Just a quick question. I know that this is amazing for the Tier 1 and Tier 2. I know it's making a huge difference. Just wondering about the Tier 3. I know every school probably has a few. What are some of the things that are being implemented or maybe being considered for those Tier 3, the intensive level, for students that, for whatever reason, these, the PBIS, they're just not working for them, and I know that happens. What are some of the things that you're considering or have tried for that Tier 3 group?
So that is a big work in progress for us as a district. Tier 3 has generally been harsh discipline and a lot of conversation from administration and working with parents and families and, trying to do everything that we can and not always having the materials for reteaching. So our goal is to, as I shared with what some of you is doing, having the resources to do this in a systematic way. So I know some of you and Hillcrest have these resources, and I know they're still implementing some of these things as in their systems, but to my knowledge, the other schools do not. So our goal is to provide those resources because they are not being used consistently. And this was done because these two individuals were getting some training and they chose to jump ahead and do some of that, which is fantastic, which is why they're pioneers and something for us to take a look at and to maybe replicate. So what you see in that presentation are some of the things that would be in place that nobody is probably using consistently. So self-reflection, right? How to teach them conflict resolution, impulse control, and you're looking to do that during that win time or wherever it would be in elementary, and then providing those resources targeted to whatever that student might need in order to understand that better, do some activities around it, have them verbalize those things. So that's where we want to get, because otherwise data is pretty clear that when you just punish, there's not a great connection. Doesn't mean we don't have consequences. Those things still need to happen. At the same time, if we keep having those same behaviors, what can we do more intensely to help mitigate that? So inconsistent at the moment, which is part of the work we have to do.
Awesome, thank you.
Ms. Harlan?
So I guess what is the burden that's placed on the teachers for ensuring that the students are being awarded for all of their points in the behavior? Is it just on the teachers? Are peers able to recommend? I mean, you had said encouraged their classmates to behave well, to get their points. Are they able to recommend awards or points at all?
Yes, I know that when I was a principal, we dove into PBIS at the high school level, and I don't know what all of our systems do, but I know that all of that is on the table, and I can confidently say it's definitely happening often, where if a student comes up and says, hey, so-and-so really did some good stuff, of course they're going to be rewarded for that behavior because a peer recommended that. Now, like anything else, if it's every day and just because I want the dollars, right, our principals are savvy at understanding, right, what's legitimate, what's not. And so they're going to have those processes in place to not just continue to reward. Again, it has to be effective and not a system that is, kids are manipulating the system, right, and our principals are well aware of that and will have parameters to reward good behavior consistently, but not without knowledge or not without a vetting of what's happening.
So has there been any feedback from the teachers of this is, and not, we're asking them yet another thing to do to manage that classroom in addition to everything else? Has there been any feedback of this is too much or at all?
Yeah, we're in the early stages. I haven't heard anything that way. Often when you go into our elementary classrooms, the teachers are recognizing positive behavior all the time, right? Like, I really like that you did this. They're purposely using that language for classroom management, and they can hand out those rewards in class if that's something they do, or oftentimes that unstructured time is where you're going to get it in lunch, at recess, and in the hallways where the principal might be around doing those things to make a connection. So I haven't heard anything that it's a burden. As we start to put some things in place, we'll see where that comes up, and that's part of the committee with our principal team to, give us that feedback on, if we're going to do these things, what does that look like for your staff members, because we are cognizant of workload and want to be understanding of that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I would just add to that right now, some of the staff at different schools are doing different things. So it might not be something in addition to, it might be in replace of. So that's part of the alignment of the systematic approach that we're trying to get at.
Okay. Well, thank you. That's been some wonderful discussion around that. Was going to ask what the reward system was. It sounds like marbles has been replaced with this Blades game, so it's been a while, but so just real quick, this program sounds great, and I know we talked a lot about, especially post-COVID with kids coming back to school, just getting reacclimated to the classroom. It sounded like things were just all over the place. So I don't know if it's just the last few years that you could kind of gauge this program, or if maybe before that time, before COVID, of, just maybe a thought of how administration and teachers think this program is being accepted and implemented. Sounds great right now, but kind of given other benchmarks of the past, I mean, any insight to that, or maybe something to talk about in the future, maybe the next update we have on this, but.
Yeah, as of right now, again, early stages, PBIS has been around for a long time. It really has. And at the high schools here, it has been tried. High school level generally stays away from it for a variety of reasons, mostly because the reward system can be more childlike, and they want to be young adults, right? It's always bridging that gap. So I have gone through the training and done different aspects in regards to that. It works very well at elementaries, as evidenced by the great things that are happening with the systems that are in place now. We're going to continue to gather feedback on doing this well and good, and using the examples of Act 20 rollout of our curriculum updates and consistency to support our teachers. I think they'll enjoy the fact that everything is common. We want to really give those options and hand those out very easily, that step 1, step 2, step 3, here's my options, here's what I'm doing. When that didn't happen and the behavior didn't change, here's my next process. That flow chart that I'll share with you is again, more high level, but we feel that that system is just going to take the onus off of what do I do, where do I go, and giving teachers a feeling that something will be done because the process is followed and is consistent. So that's what we expect. We still have to vet it because we're in the early stages, and I will keep you updated as we go through this really into next year and beyond.
Sounds great. Thank you. All right, our last order of business would be any recommendations for future meetings? All right, seeing none, if something comes up, just send an email to me or Mr. Pat, and we'll get it on the agenda. All right, thank you. Our next meeting would be April 3rd at 6 o'clock here in the boardroom. Have a good night. Meeting adjourned.